Chapter 13. I looked up and saw the sun slipping below the horizon. The sky was dim and glowed subtly with gentle hues of red and orange. The heat of the day had dropped to a warm, comfortable sensation. I looked over to Ivar as he was sitting in the jeep trying to start it up. Are you sure it doesn't need some work? I asked. The jeep looked no better for wear than the rest of Diablo Ludo. I am certain, he said, as the machine finally sprang to life. The engine roared like an animal, and a large billowing cloud of dark gas spewed out and blocked out the lovely sunset I had been enjoying. The entire jeep trembled violently as it coughed and belched loudly. Ivar motioned me over to get in. With a little trepidation, I took his invitation and belted myself in, or rather tied myself in. Ivar put his hand around the gear shift and then looked to me. Are you ready? He asked. I looked out ahead, and the world before us was getting darker. Yeah, let's go, I said. Ivar pushed down on the pedal, and the jeep jerked forward. My seat rope cut into my waist as I flew up from my seat. As we left the town, Ivar pulled off the dirt road, and we tumbled down through a thick field of dry brush. I was about to ask Ivar exactly where he was going, but considering things, I wasn't sure he'd have an answer for me, so I let it go. As Ivar drove, I tried to sleep, but it seemed as soon as I was able to shut my eyes, we would hit another large sand dune. Since rest wasn't going to happen, I decided to take in the scenery. The sun was completely gone, and there was no light save for the two headlights of the jeep. I looked around, and there was nothing but inky darkness all around. I looked up to the sky and marveled at the millions of stars hanging above us. I held tight to the sides of my seat to keep myself from jostling around too much, and I was able to better concentrate on the twinkling lights above. I had never seen the sky so full and beautiful before. I knew there were billions of stars in the sky. I knew that, but I had never actually seen them before. There they were, far above us, as they had been for millions of years before our existence. I started to understand why contemplation of the stars was such a big deal for some people. It was hard to look up and not think about your place in the universe. I then began to wonder, out of the billions of people in the world, why did I have to be me? We had another steep hill of sand, and as we crashed down from it, the jeep stopped. The engine hummed loudly and shook like an earthquake. I looked over to Ivar and saw his gaze fixed solidly forward. What? I asked. Ivar merely pointed, and by the meager light of the headlights, I saw a small building at the bottom of a small valley. I couldn't see it very well, but it looked old and had a small tower on top of it. Next to it was an oddly green patch of grass with a large blackened tree sitting nearby. Its branches were large and spread far. What's that? The church. Okay, that is where the one wants you to go. It's time for you, Ivar said, and shifted the jeep into gear. We drove forward and sped down to the valley floor and shot straight for the church. As we got closer, I could see more detail. The church was built of what looked like stone or large brick. There were pretty stained glass windows running along the side, and there was a large door made of a dark wood in front. Ivar parked the jeep a few yards away. We could park closer. No, we can't. From here you must continue alone. What? I cannot guide you any longer. You must face what is inside that church alone. Okay, I said. With a deep breath, I slid out of the jeep and dusted myself off. I started toward the church, but I heard Ivar call out to me. Jake, here, he said, and then threw me something large wrapped in paper. I grabbed it and pulled it open. I was holding the guns Ivar had given me and a belt loaded with ammo. I looked up at him. Just in case, he said. I came closer to the church, and I felt a chill run up my spine as I approached the door. I wrapped my hand around the handle, and I began to pull. I felt the full weight of the wooden door as I struggled to move it. It creaked loudly, and the hinges stretched against who knows how many years of rust and dirt. I looked up at the open doorway and saw nothing but darkness inside. I went on in, and after a few steps, a loud, dull crash shot out, and I spun around to see the door had closed behind me. What little noise there had been outside was blocked out. The crickets and rattlesnakes had been muted. I felt trapped in a void of space. I stepped forward, and the floorboards below moaned softly. "Hello?" I called. No answer, other than my echo bouncing against the walls. I felt my way through the darkness, and I found a pew. The wood was surprisingly smooth and cool to the touch. "Is there anyone here?" I asked again. Still no answer. I then began to get the feeling that I wasn't alone. It felt as though the darkness had come alive, and I felt its icy grip over my heart. My breath became short, and it was like I was drowning. I turned and hurried back the way I came, but I stopped as I heard a violent crack shoot up from the floor. I turned and I heard splintered wood falling against the floor. Another crack, another. Soon there was a choir of broken wood ringing out above and below me. I took a step back and felt an icy, clawed hand wrap around my leg. I panicked and leapt forward. I heard a hissing coming from all around me, and then the sound of heavy claws digging into wood and stone grew louder. A giant hole was ripped out of the roof, and the moonlight was pouring in, and I was able to see. I saw a church full of creatures slinking along the floor and down the walls. They had smooth, oily skin and hissed like snakes as they crawled along. Their claws and teeth were huge and sharp. Their black marble eyes were crazed and wild. I pulled out the guns and started firing. They weren't strong, as they exploded with just one shot, but there were a lot of them. It seemed for each one I shot, three more would take its place. They were closing in on me from all sides. As one monster got too close, I pointed both guns at its head, and as I pulled the triggers, I discovered I was out of bullets. I also had no time to reload. I put the guns back in the belt and jumped forward as far as I could. 1,000 hisses echoed around me as I flew over the beasts. I felt their claws snatch at me. I dropped down to the floor and tumbled forward. I sprinted for the door, and as I reached it, it flew open, knocking me back. Light poured in from the outside. I shielded my eyes from the brilliance. The monsters cried out in pain, and they all crawled back to the dark corners they had come from. I got up slowly and backed away. I heard footsteps, and soon the door closed. The light had gone out, and as I lowered my hand, I saw a man standing before me. "Hello," he said. His voice was deep, warm, and familiar. It was Jonathan, but he was a lot more put together than he had been at Burning Man. "Hi, again," I said. "Sorry about that. We try to keep that kind of element out, but it's sometimes hard." "Sure," I said. He just smiled at me. Just being in his presence was beginning to make me feel secure and safe. He approached me carefully. "You must be wondering why I did this. Just one more slice of crazy and an insane sandwich. Come with me," he said as he brushed past me toward the altar at the front of the church. I followed a couple steps behind. He walked up to the altar, turned right, and headed through a door I had not noticed before. I walked up to it, and unlike the door at the front of the church, it was a standard-looking pine door, very plain, nondescript. I opened it up and walked through. After I shut the door, I turned and was taken by the scenery change. I found myself standing in a large dining hall. The floor was shiny and black, and there were large ivory columns on either side of the room that reached up far beyond my sight into a dark void that was hanging above me. The columns led up to a large dormant fireplace at the other end of the room, just beyond a large table that sat in the middle. The whole room was very dark until a bright flash of flame exploded inside the fireplace, and everything was bathed in a warm amber glow. I could see the food that sat upon the table better, and it looked to be quite a feast. It was set up very elegantly with silver candlesticks between each place setting and evenly spaced serving dishes with all kinds of food. There were bowls of exotic fruits and plates filled with well-cooked meat dishes and several bottles of wine. I could smell the spices coming up into the air. I took a step toward the table, and I heard voices out of the shadows. Figures appeared and took their places at the table. They were chatting to each other, but their voices were too soft to hear exactly what they were saying. "You came just in time," Jonathan's voice came at me from behind. I spun around, and he walked up to me and patted me gently on the back. "Come, meet the others," he said as he prodded me along. As we approached the table, the guests took quick notice of my presence. I noticed that they were all very well dressed. The men were clad in expensive-looking suits, and the women were styling some incredibly fancy dresses. They were pouring wine into their glasses as Jonathan took his seat. "Everyone, this is Jake Corba. He stopped by for a visit, he said as he filled his glass with a very fragrant red wine. I looked out at the others at the table, and their eyes met mine with unimpressed looks. Whatever comfort I had been feeling was long gone by then. I took notice of a woman 2 seats away. Her hair was red like fire. She was very beautiful, but there was some kind of coldness behind her eyes that I could feel at the core of my soul. Really, Jonathan, it's a little late to bring in new members. He's here on a matter of his own, Lilith. I would thank you to make him feel welcome. He's not bad looking. It's nice to have a little eye candy around. No offense to you, of course, Jonathan. Of course not, he said with a light laugh. He looked back up to me, and I was pretty sure my confusion wasn't difficult to see. Have a seat, he said. I turned and saw a vacant chair nearby. I sat down and continued trying to make sense of the situation. We meet here for dinner every now and then to discuss things. I find it's easier and far more productive to have certain conversations over a nice, relaxing meal, Jonathan said, as if to answer a question I had forgotten to ask. The others at the table had already begun eating. I could hear the clink of silverware against fine china. I began to realize there was light violin music playing from somewhere. That's great, but I need to talk to you about, I began, but he threw his hand up to stop me. I know, the demon. Can you help me? I don't know. We need to figure that out. How? Let me, Jonathan, Lilith said. I haven't had a chance to do this for years. I looked over and her lips were stretched into a wide grin. An odd heat coming from her eyes replaced the cold I had sensed before. She held her hand out to me from across the table. I looked to Jonathan and he nodded to me. I got up and went over to Lilith. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers, wrapped around like snakes, and her grip was stronger than her delicate frame led me to believe it would be. Very interesting, she said. She closed her eyes, and they fluttered gently, and her grip tightened. When I felt a bone breaking, I pulled free and fell to the floor. I looked up at her, and she was smiling down at me like the cat that ate the canary. Sorry, I should have warned you it could get intense, she said. What did you see? Jonathan asked. I'm not totally sure. It's like nothing I've seen before. His path diverges into 2 roads. Along one, I see death and destruction, horrible black skies and oceans of blood and acid. Along another, I see salvation, life, love. I see great promise in this one, or the end of everything, she said, and looked over to Jonathan. What would you advise? I'm not sure. He could be worse than 1,000 plagues, or he could save everything. I think it would be foolish to allow him to make those choices for himself, she said. I stood up from the floor, and I looked over to Jonathan, who then looked up to me. Everyone has the born right to choose their own path, Lilith. You know that as well as anyone, Jonathan said. It sounded as if he were scolding her. I realized that. But I think, she started, but Jonathan raised his hand gently up, and that small gesture was enough to silence Lilith's protest. He turned his attention back to me. And what do you want? He asked. I don't know what's going on here. Ivar said you would be able to cure me. He said you could release me from the demon. Is that why you are here? Yeah. You, until now, have been blissfully ignorant of your family's history. You have come here to be freed of a curse that was leveled upon your bloodline centuries ago. My question to you would be, are you sure you want this? Of course. My life has been hell because of this demon. If I don't cut that cord now, it's going to kill me. I need to be freed. Now, I shouted. The sound of eating had stopped, and I noticed everyone at the table was staring right at me. Life is complicated, Mr. Corba. We are brought into it under different circumstances. We spend a good amount of our lives dealing with those circumstances. For some it's easy, for others exceedingly difficult. Those who are tried the hardest often find strength and purpose through their trials. I admit that yours is a unique case. I can release you from the demon, as you wish, but you must first decide if it's really what you want, if it's truly who you are. It is only until we accept who we truly are that life begins. I didn't come here to hear riddles. You may show yourself out now, Mr. Corba, Jonathan said calmly. What? Our business is done. You are free of the demon, as you wanted. Just like that? Just like that. I wish you luck. Thanks. Thank you, I said. So I began backing away toward the door I came in through. I emerged back in the church, and I felt a little different. The growing discomfort I had been suffering for so long was gone. I knew in my heart of hearts that I was finally free of the demon. Brings back memories, huh? A voice in the darkness said a voice in the darkness. Sam's voice. My eyes began to focus to the dim light, and I saw him standing in the back of the church. You were in a church like a lot like this one, weren't you? How do you know about that? I asked as I started toward him. I guess I should introduce myself to you. For real this time. My real name's James Corba, but you can call me Uncle Jimmy. I was going by Sam Ebedon since the fire at the church. Made things easier all the way around, he said. I stopped in my tracks. There had been something about Sam that seemed oddly familiar, but I couldn't figure out what it was. It was always just in the back of my head, but I couldn't see it clearly. As I got closer, I looked more carefully at his face, and I began to see the small details he shared with my father, his brother. I don't understand. Of course not. Let me break it down for you. That night in the church happened because of me. You? Yes, I'm the one who called for the demon in the first place. You did this to me? Yes and no. I didn't really intend for the demon to take you as a vessel. I conjured it forth for it to take me. You were supposed to be the sacrifice. I needed an innocent soul to offer. When Jerry told me he had a kid on the way, I started planning. He and I never were quite on the same page with this whole demon thing. He wanted to keep up the family tradition, while I realized a long time ago we were on the losing end of this battle. We're mortal. We die. Demons, well, most demons don't. I decided to switch sides. That night was supposed to be my baptism. That night was supposed to be my baptism. But instead, the demon chose to take you and wasted everyone else in the process. I don't believe this. You caused the deaths of all those people. My parents. Yes, but let's not forget what you got in the bargain. The demon. You really just snuck that right out from under me, didn't you, kiddo? Don't get me wrong, I was mad for a long time about it, but I mellowed. I'm over it, especially now. Now that you're giving it up, I'll be able to take it off your hands. Better late than never, he said. I just stood there watching him, hearing him. I saw the smile on his face, not a bit of regret, not an ounce of remorse. He murdered my mother and father. He cursed me with the demon. He single-handedly destroyed my life before I even had a chance to start living any part of it. And there he was, listing his crimes to me as though he were bragging, as though he was proud of everything he had done, as though the power he sought justified any death or destruction he may have inflicted, like his victims were obstacles to his grand ambition. I walked up to him, and without even thinking, I grabbed his throat and closed my fists around it. I felt his neck crumple un- under the pressure. I looked up to him and saw that he was still smiling. I realized what I was doing wasn't going to change anything. It was clear he didn't care about the lives he took or the pain he had inflicted. I just let go of him and pushed him back. The demon's gone. At least for me it is. I'm free. You can do whatever you want now. Just leave me the hell alone, I said, and pushed past him and out the door. I stepped out of the church and took a breath, and the air filled my lungs. It was cool and calming. I stepped onto the dirt. I could see Ivor on the jeep far above me. I headed back, but as I did, I felt a force pull me back. I flew up and landed flat on my back. I looked up and saw James standing over me. I scrambled up to my feet. I'm afraid it's not that easy, he said happily. Happily. Don't push me. I don't want to kill you, but I will. Wait, that's a lie. I do want to kill you. If it were up to me, I'd let you go about your merry way. But we kind of made a deal. We? A large hand came down and wrapped around my head and lifted me up. I soon felt the sensation of weightlessness as whatever it was that had me threw me. I hit the large black tree hard and felt all the air in my lungs escape. As I fell to the ground, I looked up and saw the demon towering over me. It was huge, and its body was bestial and human at the same time. Its large arms were as big as tree trunks, and his hands had long razor-sharp claws at the end of each finger. Its face was contorted in rage, and fire spewed from its eyes. "Korba," it growled as it stomped forward. I crawled back to avoid its large feet. I felt the strength draining from me. It swung its arm around, striking me, and I went flying across the small patch of grass. "I think it might be best if you just stay down, buddy," James said. "This guy here is really mad. He might go easy on you if you just let it happen." "Not likely," it barked, as two large leather wings sprouted from behind its back. It stretched them high and howled into the sky. "I am growing stronger by the second. Your blood will bring me new life." I jumped up and tried to run, but it was on me. It pushed me to the ground and leaned in close to my face. I smelled its breath. It was like dead flesh and brimstone. "There's no escape, Korba. This was going to happen. Either now or later. I was destined to kill you. There was no way you could avoid it. You came here to release yourself from me, didn't you?" it asked. I nodded defiantly. Its mouth shifted into a sick smile, and it laughed. "Very foolish. You should have known. This moment was meant to be. It's who you are. My eternal victim. This is never going to end for you," it said. "I've already told you. You were cursed, with or without me. Just lay down now like a good dog and take your punishment." I felt a heat rise through me. The words of the demon stung because as I lay there, pinned against the cold ground, I began to see that I was right. It was never going to end. Whether or not I lived through this and was totally free of the demon, the curse of my family was eternal and there was no escaping it. The demon was right. Ivar was right. The trap had been set centuries ago, and I walked right into it. I wondered if it happened like this for the others in my family. Were they fooled by some deceptive force? As the demon stood over me, I felt the dark mists of fate swirl around me, clutching me, choking me. Then the words of Jonathan rang in my head. It was as though my fractured mind was finally coming into alignment. I reached up and clutched the demon's chest. I felt my fingers dig into its flesh. It burned, but I dug in deeper. A warm black liquid began to seep from the demon's skin. Its confident face broke. "What are you doing?" it asked. I could hear the shake in its voice. This isn't going to happen," I hissed. I felt my strength growing. "I'm not going to be a victim. I know who I am now. I'm not going to let you win," I said. I felt my legs come to life, and I pushed back on the demon. I flew up and knocked the demon on its back. I heard the bones in its wings break, and it shrieked in pain. I pushed my hand back down deeper into its chest, feeling the fire rush up through my skin. I felt something deep inside erupt, and light began to blast out of the demon's body. I heard Sam coming up behind me, but with one arm, I knocked him away. Power began filling my body. "Stop, stop," the demon begged. "I have been stupid. Running from me. You feed off fear, pain, and misery, and I've been a banquet for you since day one, but no more. You've inspired me. It's not written that bad things can do good, and that's what I'll do. I will use your power to protect the innocent. I will use your force to fight the dark garbage of this universe." "No," the beast shrieked. I could feel its cold flesh begin to seep into mine. It was like a jet of ice racing through my veins, but I held on as tightly as I could. "When you hear laughter, your ears will bleed. When I feel joy, your flesh will burn. For as long as I live, you will be trapped in my body, and with every life I save, every day that the sun rises and the earth spins because of me, you will know that you will never be free, because I realize now that you are as cursed with me as I am with you." I screamed, and I felt a huge surge blast through me. I saw only white and felt electricity running through my entire body. I woke up in the dirt. James was laying a few feet away, unconscious. I got up and felt a sharp pain stick at my back. As I got my balance, I felt a familiar feeling. Something in my soul. The demon was back. But as familiar as it was, there was something different about it. Something something almost comforting about it. I looked up and saw Jonathan standing across from me. "I heard something out here," I trust everything is all right? Everything is fine, thanks, I said. I can see that now. Good luck to you, Mr. Corba, he said, and then quietly returned to the church. I looked down at my Uncle James. I thought for a moment on what to do with him. The rage I was feeling was unlike anything I had ever felt before. I saw a large stake of wood nearby. I picked it up and contemplated everything I could do with it. James woke up. No, Jake, wait, don't do it, please, he begged. The fear was real. That was enough. Almost. I bent down and picked James up and walked back over to the church. He was babbling, confused. I kicked the door open and marched up to the altar and dropped him upon it. He looked up at me with a curious look on his face. I'm not going to kill you. You're a horrible human being, and I wish to God I could kill you, but I'm not going to give you or the demon the satisfaction. I'm better than that. I'm better than you. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to leave, I said flatly. But why did you bring me back in here? To tell you what's going to happen. I'm not going to kill you. In fact, I'm going to let you go. You're going to wait here until I walk out those doors. When I do, you can leave. Sound fair? I don't get this. I don't care, I said. And then I turned around and marched back to the doors of the church. As I did, I could hear the faint sound of claws scratching against old wood planks, and I felt a smile come over me. As I got to the door, I pulled it open and turned back to James, who was still sitting at the altar. I could see the glowing eyes of those weird creatures popping out of the darkness, and the slow movements of their limbs as they climbed up and down the walls of the old church. So, Uncle Jimmy, if you can't get out of here, you're free. That's the deal, I said. What do you mean, if? He asked. And as he did, I saw a wall of creatures coming down upon him. I turned away and shut the door behind me. As I walked away from the church, I heard the faint shriek of someone being removed from his skin. I heard the jeep getting closer and a pair of headlights getting brighter. Jake, you okay? Evar called out. I'm fine, I said as I jumped into the jeep. We found a smoother road back to Diablo Ludo. The night seemed even more quiet as we drove along. My mind was calm for the first time in a long time. I watched as the dark scenery blurred past us. I could feel the demon within me, but I didn't care. I pushed its curses and rages to the back of my head. In fact, I found some comfort in it. For the past couple of days I felt twisted and skewed, but in that jeep I felt whole at last. Well, I asked. Well, what? How did it go? You saw it. Saw what? You didn't see me wrestling with the demon in front of the church? What? No. I saw you go in, and the next thing I remember was driving up to pick you up, Ivar said. I looked back the way we came, and I was getting that confused feeling again. What happened? I talked to the one. He said he could release me, and he did. That's good. And I took it back. What? What? I took the demon back. Why? It dawned on me that my family's curse seems to only work when we deny it, when we close ourselves away and shut off from reality. That's when we lose. When we accept who we are, we can face our enemies. Enemies who are going to come after us whether we're ready or not. I guess I've decided to stop being a victim, I said. I could sense the proud tone in my voice, and I felt my back a little taller. Are you sure about this? No, but it's just my cross to bear. This was how my ancestors dealt with this stuff, right? In a manner of speaking, yes. Maybe I'll even find a way to make a buck with it. Really? Why not? I'm sure there's some way to cash in. Your epiphany is very good, Jake, but you've just come to terms with all this. You've got a lot to learn before you can go out and attack the world. Maybe, but I got you. Excuse me? I want to know about my family. All of it. I want you to teach me. I don't know all that much about your family, just some minor histories. That's better than what I got. You can start me off, and maybe we